Matthew 14:22. We'll see if I think it's got a new battery in it. We'll see how that goes. Not Matthew 14:22, but my lapel mic does. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. This was after the feeding of the so many thousand. I forget which one, but anyway. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went into them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit. And they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God. And when they were gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret, and he healed people in that land. So, if you'd like to bow your heads for prayer one more time, Brother Robert Bean, please lead us.
Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for the privilege to be in your house tonight, God. Thank you, Lord, Father, for your precious word. I pray that you want to bless the reading of it. Now, Lord God, we will run it. Be with the Lord and bless the Lord. Heavenly Lord, to say the words to us. Lord, help us to lift us up, Lord, so we can go out and do thy will. Thank you, Lord, for all that you do, Lord. Be with us, Lord, as we look about the rest of this week and the rest of our lives. I ask always that you, in the forefront of our mind, Lord, do thy will. We praise you and bless you for all that you do. In Jesus' holy name.
May be seated. We went to Coles before Christmas, and Sadie likes baby Jesus, and she likes nativity sets, and I've got more than one sermon out of her fooling with the nativity set in one variety or another. And we were at Coles, I'm pretty sure it was at Coles, and she found this scene, and I don't know who all's in the scene, but I'm sure there's baby Jesus, probably Mary and Joseph, I don't know. It may just be baby Jesus, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's a little scene, and it's made out of resin, so kind of like glass, but not quite. So it's breakable. And it has this light. You can push a button and turn a light on. And I think the light even has the timer, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how to set it, but I think it said it did. So you can push this button, turn the light on, and it stays on. It shines down on the scene. And I guess you can set it up in your house at night, turn the lights off, and there you got the nativity scene with the light shining on it. Well, Sadie wanted that thing. And it's not a toy. It's, like I said, it's something that somebody would buy, set up in their house for decoration during Christmas. So Sadie had bought it. She was taking it home, and we were checking out. And the lady at the cashier said, and we were telling Sadie, I think, hold on to Jesus or something like that. And the lady at the cashier said that's what her mama always told her, to hold on to Jesus and everything would be okay. So it was just a pretty interesting scenario and a good lesson, because Sadie was carrying that little Jesus and she didn't want to break it. But the thing is, if we'll hold on to Jesus in our life, we won't get broken, if you will. Things will be good with us. And I was thinking today about, I hate to say two different kinds of people, or there are two different actions, I guess would be the best way to put it. There are two different actions that you and I can take when trouble arises in our life. We can hold on to Jesus, or we can go do something else. And I am sure that about everybody here can think of people who do both of those things. Some people, if bad things happen in their life, they run to church, so they run to prayer, they run to people they know are Christians and ask them to pray. They run to their Bible, they run to the knees, they run to the prayer closet, whatever. You know, when bad things happen in life, that's the reaction that they have. They come to Jesus Christ, trusting that He's going to do something about it. But other people, you could probably name some, That when bad things happen in their life or when they're struggling with life, things aren't going quite right, they run the other direction. And instead of coming closer to God to seek His help, maybe they stop coming to church, they stop praying, they stop hanging around Christian friends, and they isolate themselves with their problem, and they wind up in trouble. That happens quite a bit. And the thing is that the people who run to Jesus, you find them growing, a lot of times being stronger Christians, don't you? Because they've learned through experience that when they come to the Lord, then things go okay. He's able to see you through whatever's going on in one way or the other. So your faith grows in what God is able to do. But for those people who run the other direction and they just kind of push aside everything and they sit and contemplate their issues and their problems of life, those people tend to never quite stick, if you will, when it comes to church and when it comes to religion. Because the thing is, life is full of troubles. I mean, they're going to come. You get over if you're going through something now, you get over that. You may have a period where things are fine, but that period is not going to last forever. And you're going to find this other problem that you think at the time is bigger than anything you've ever faced in your life. Well, again, for the people who run to Jesus, their faith grows when problems come. For the people who find themselves running away and burying themselves in their worry, well, they never quite catch on. Because all they do throughout their life is run from what they should be running to. Well, this scripture is kind of like that in a sense. And I know it's been beat to death in that sense. But I want to look at it tonight shortly. And I'll try not to be long because y'all are thinking about cookies and who's going to win the contest. And you're thinking about if your cookies are getting cold in the car, if you can influence the judges, all those things are crossing your mind right now. If they weren't, they are now, right? Okay. So, the first thing that you might notice about this whole scenario of the disciples being out on the sea, the wind, the storm, is that Jesus put them in it. He did it. He put them there. It was no accident that Jesus did it. Verse 22, he said, straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to go into a ship and go before him into the other side while he sent the multitude away. So Jesus did this. It's no surprise. I mean, he is God. Now, he did limit his knowledge while on earth because he took on the form of flesh. And there were times when, it would seem that he thought like a man did, not in a sinful way, but he willingly limited what he could have known. But I imagine that Jesus knew the storm was coming, don't you? I don't think it took him by surprise. It took his disciples by surprise, but it didn't take him by surprise. So the first point of this whole thing is that Jesus sent them into the trouble for a purpose. And the Bible says that he's always on our side and he wants the best for us. The Bible teaches us those truths. So sometimes the struggle that we might face can be God ordained in our life. It can be something that he puts there, that he wants there. He's trying to get something out of us by doing it. So that's a little different. I was looking at that scripture and maybe it's dawned on you before. I'm not sure if it's dawned on me before, but it dawned on me again as I looked at it today. That it wasn't happenstance. It wasn't a storm that came just accidentally. It was Jesus putting them in the place to fight with that storm all night. So, when you go through troubles in life, not everything, I think, is that way. But a lot of times, God puts us in it, doesn't he? He puts us in it. He tests us. The Bible says that our faith is precious and that our faith is tried. So he puts us right in the middle of the storm, right in the middle of the trouble, right in the middle of all the things going on. If you look in the Bible, those people who were closest to God sometimes had severe troubles, didn't they? They didn't live this amazing life where nothing ever happened bad. They had problems come up everywhere they looked. The Apostle Paul, look at his life, all the things that happened to him, and all the problems that he faced through life, all the things that came up King David, you look at his life, you say, well, he was king, he was a child, and he was brought to be king, and that's amazing. Well, he endured a lot of hardship as well, some of his own doing, but God put him in hardship, troubles. So, troubles can be God ordained in our life. He can put us in it. Verse 23, it said, and when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray, and when the evening was come, he was there alone. So, the second thing is that Jesus was praying. And I don't know, in my little mind, I think that why would Jesus pray? Because he's God, and he knows everything already, and he can do whatever he wants, and he made the world, so why is he praying? Well, I don't know. He's praying because he's submitting to the Father, the Son submitting to the Father on earth, and he was praying this prayer, and if you read some other prayers that Jesus prayed in the Bible, John 17, he prays about us, he prays about his disciples. Prayer that we talked about last week, I think it was, where he was praying for Peter that his faith fail not. So when Jesus was up on that mountain praying all night, I imagine he was probably at least mentioned those guys out there in the boat, don't you think? Yeah, he cared about them. He had walked with them all this time. He knew them before they were born. When they were born, he knew that they would be. So he knew them. And he was praying for them. I think we could draw that conclusion. And I think also we might conclude from that and from other things in the Bible that when we're going through trouble, even when God ordains it and even when he puts us right in the middle of the fire, he's still with us and he still cares about what's going on. So, if your inclination, when trouble comes knocking on your door, if your inclination is to run away from God at a time like that, it's possible you're running away from his will for your life because his will might be that storm. And it's also possible that you are forgetting the fact that Jesus loves you in the midst of the storm. So there's the setup. Sends him out on the boat, sends him out into the middle of the sea, the storm's coming, and he's praying on the mountain and he sends the crowd away, and then he goes to pray on the mountain. Verse 24, but the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with the waves, for the wind was contrary. So there's the storm. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went into them walking on the sea. So this is, again, in my imagination, just reading this, not thinking about those numbers and what any of those numbers meant, I guess I always just figured, there was a little storm and it passed and Jesus came walking on the water or whatever. I was on a storm once out in Center Hill Lake, and it wasn't very long. It just kind of was. I can't swim a lick, so Mama was trying to put this life jacket on me that was more the size of Bethany Knight or something like that, and she managed to squeeze it around me. Maybe why I have acid reflux to this day. I don't know. I'm kidding. But it was a storm, and it came. We came around the corner of the lake. We were going across what's the deepest part of the lake, at least where I live, and we come around the corner, and there's the storm. Things are going everywhere. It blows the pontoon thing down, and I'm trying to hold it, and it almost knocks me out in the water. But it lasted about 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Seemed like longer to me, but it wasn't long at all. And when I was reading that, I just think, well, they was out in a storm on the boat, and it was going to go by. But they had been in the storm a long time. The Bible says that it was the fourth watch of the night, which meant that it was about morning, which meant that the Ricky Skaggs song, The Darkest Hour is Just Before the Dawn, right? Which meant that they'd been toiling with this thing all night. It was almost 6 o'clock in the morning. Do you think it ever crossed their mind? Where did Jesus go and what was his plan sending us out here in this storm? Do you ever think it ever crossed their mind? Do you think somewhere along about midnight, it was apparently still daylight when he sent them away because there were still multitudes around him. He had just fed the 4,000 or 5,000. I don't remember which crowd this was. But he had sent them away and sent them out on the ocean. And here it is almost morning, and they've been fighting this storm all night. Do you think that under their breath they might have questioned what was going on? Sometimes we go through stuff like that. And quite honestly, sometimes it seems like God doesn't show up until right at the very end. Sometimes you might feel like Martha and Mary. You're too late. You ever have anything like that happen in your life? I know some of y'all are just wonderful, faithful Christians, and you just take everything in faith and write poems about it, right? No, probably not all of us. Some of us get aggravated, and we think, well, why didn't you do this earlier? And we say, you shouldn't question God, and maybe you shouldn't, but the psalmist did over there in Psalms. God understands that we're not smart, that we don't always think with a faithful heart, that sometimes we think with a heart of flesh and a mind full of worry, and we're thinking, where are you at when I need you? Human, why didn't you come? And the Bible, that song, well, it's a song actually that says, right on time. He is right on time, but maybe not when we wanted him there. But maybe just right before he knows we're going to break without his presence or his work. And that's what he did to the disciples. They had to be tired. They had fought this thing all night. And I don't know much about sailing. The closest I have been to a sailing ship is walking on one that was docked and taking pictures of it. That's the closest I've been. I have no idea about sailing. Don't know what it's like. Don't know what anything's called. Know nothing about it. And I don't even know if this was a sailing ship. Probably not. But you know what? I bet they're tired, don't you? I bet they were looking for relief. So, here comes Jesus. Verse 26. So it's almost morning. They've been fighting the storm all night. Verse 26, and when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a spirit. And they cried out for fear. So when they first see Jesus, they're afraid. They don't know who it is. Their faith is maybe a little bit shaken, and they see Jesus walking on the water. And we can criticize them for that, but I guarantee you, if you're down at Center Hill Lake and Jesus came walking across the water to you, or if you're at Dow Hollow or Croto Hole and he comes walking across the water to you, what's the first thought you're going to be thinking? But Jesus says to them, verse 27, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. So then you have Peter. Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. So here's Peter, and people have all kinds of different thoughts about what we should say about Peter there. Now, some people say, well, Peter had a lot of faith, and we shouldn't criticize him. And other people say, well, if Peter had had enough faith, he wouldn't have started sinking. So we have a right to criticize him. And other people would say, well, maybe Peter didn't have too much faith, but he did have enough faith to get out of the boat. And he's the only one who did. So, whatever camp you're in, and I guess I'm in that last one, he did take his eyes off Jesus. And Jesus criticized him for that. I don't know if you want to call it criticism or not, but Jesus says, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? In verse 31, he said, why did you doubt me? So whatever conclusions we draw from this story, the only conclusion we are given for sure in the Bible is that Peter's faith wasn't up to par. We do know that he got out of the boat. That he's of those who are on the boat, he's the only one that had enough faith to get out. But we also know that his faith faltered and he began to sink. So, I guess I could twist this scripture plumb out of its roots and say something like, when you're in trouble and you take your eyes off Jesus, you'll sink. Right? Well, it can mean that. And it does in a sense, but a different way a little bit. Because the main point or the main thrust of what the problem was here was what the problem not only with Peter but with all the rest of them. Is that they had walked with him all this time and they hadn't learned anything yet. He had been healing people, raising the, I don't know if he'd raised the dead by this point, but he had been healing people. And he'd just fed the 5,000 or the 4,000. Did you look? How many is it? 5. Yeah, it irritates me. There's a number there. Yeah, he had just fed the 5,000 plus the children, the women. So that's pretty miraculous. But when they get out on the boat in the middle of the storm, they still don't have faith. They still don't trust him. So when the storm comes, they're all worried about the storm. When they see the thing walking on the sea, they're all worried about what the thing walking on the sea is. And instead of trusting Jesus Christ, whom they had access to, God on earth, that they could touch, see, hear, whatever, have lunch with, instead of trusting him, they're scared out of their minds. That's the issue. And focusing on the fear that they had, instead of focusing on the faith that they should have had. Now, am I in any position to criticize them? I guess I can stand back and I can say, if this is an ideal, they didn't meet it. If this is what God wants, they didn't meet it. But when I look inside myself, I see the same struggle. I see the ability to trust God when things are good, but to wonder what his plan is when things are bad. It's like somebody I heard, and I don't know if this is a preacher or a teacher giving an example, or somebody actually said this, can't remember, but basically said, I've prayed to God about who I'm supposed to marry, but I'm afraid God would send me the ugliest thing that ever walked the face of the earth. You know? It's sort of like God is the gigantic dispenser of all those things you need but you don't want. You know, he's the cough syrup that you can't stand but you know will make you better. But that's not who God is in the Bible. He loves us and he wants best for us. So, you know, faith, it's a catchy thing. It's easy to trust God sometimes and hard sometimes. And one thing that I've noticed, we can trust God for these enormous things as long as we can't see those things. I can trust God that he saved me. I can trust him that I'm going to heaven, but I'm not sure I can trust him about that because I can see that right now, you know? Well, Peter had a faith issue. The other disciples had a faith issue. Sometimes I have a faith issue. Do you? The Bible says if we have faith the size of a mustard seed, we could move mountains. And I know that you can take that just straight out of the text, or you can take that and say, well, that means other things. But whatever, whether it be mountains physically or whether it be mountains in this world, I'm not moving many. Are you? So, do we have mustard seed size faith? Little bitty stuff, isn't it? Little bitty stuff. We used to sell those things in the store. Little bitty things. So I'm not really here tonight to criticize worry or faith or lack thereof. I'm not really here to talk about you should face your problems with a smile on your face. Because you probably won't see me doing that. I try to have faith in God, and I believe he can do amazing things. And I've seen him do amazing things in my life. But I've also stood in an emergency room with Sadie and cried too much to pray. I've been there too. So, what I am trying to say, though, is kind of a directional thing. Within whatever faith we have and as much as we can muster, we can either run toward God in time of turmoil and trouble or away from him. Peter, he kind of got lost in the shuffle, maybe. I don't know. But I know sometimes I have. And the thing is, if you run away from him in times of trouble, then you miss the lesson. You miss the strength that exists there. Because what if there's bigger trouble coming down the road 5, 10 years from now, and you don't have the faith for that because you ran from God during this one? Because those moments of our lives, what builds faith in him. So that's what I'm trying to say. We all have faith sometimes it's not the best. But with whatever faith we have, it's like that man in the Bible. He said, help thou mine unbelief. And with whatever we got, point it to Jesus, not away from him. Ask you to stand. Like Brother Raymond and song musicians, please come.
161.
May have something going on in your life. I don't know what it is. For some people, I do know there are things going on in their lives. But I don't know what exactly or who exactly the Spirit might deal with. So if the Spirit's dealing with you and calling you to either come get saved and trust in this God and this Jesus Christ who loves you so much, or you've got something that you've been dealing with or some problem in your life that you would bring to Jesus, and you might feel comfortable just praying at an altar and asking him to help. I don't know. But whatever the response, I pray that it would be a response Jesus directed. As we sing this song, please come to him.